Go for it.
There we go. Thank you, Chair.
Good afternoon, members, officers, and the portfolio holders that are joining us today. It's the Wednesday, 19th of July, Learning and Skills Scrutiny Committee, an agenda item with a little bit of interest. Welcome all those joining us from outside the membership as well. We have some attendees, so welcome to you all. Members, we do have Welsh translation today if you wish to use it. Is everybody happy how they can access the translation if needed? Yeah, good. I'll move on then to item 1 on the agenda, to receive apologies. I've also already mentioned that Councillor Lucy isn't joining us today, and I'm sure you'll agree our thoughts are going out to Lucy today, and but she is hoping to join us in full council tomorrow. Any other apologies, Cav?
Yes, we've received apologies from Councillor Sandra Davis, who is portfolio holder for youth services, from Councillor Jackie Charlton, portfolio holder for Agrina Powys, Lynette Lovell, Director of Education and Children, and Jane Thomas, Head of Finance.
Good. Members happy to accept them. Apologies. Thank you. Item 2 on your agenda is disclosures of interest. Has anybody got anything they wish to disclose in relation to any of our agenda items today? And similarly, declarations of party whip, same comments. Judge on your silence if anybody has any declarations. Good. Moving on to item 4 on the agenda are the minutes of our previous meetings. The minutes of the 31st of May 2023. I'm not going to take them through you. I'm going to assume that you had an opportunity to view them. Is everybody happy that they're a correct record of the meeting of the 31st of May? They are in our agenda pack, pages 3 to 20, and also then seconded, and everybody in favour they're a true and correct record. And then also the minutes of 21st of June 2023. Similar comments have been circulated. Is everybody happy that they get signed? Proposer and a seconder, please. Yes, thank you, Sue. Councillor Glynn, thank you very much. Okay, that's the formalities of the meeting. We're now getting to the nitty gritty, and item 5 on the agenda is youth service strategy. You've already heard that we've had apologies from Councillor Sandra Davis. So I'm going to come straight to you, Helen, if that's okay. Documentation in the reports back, and Helen, if you wish to introduce and take us through it, and I'm sure you'll be happy for some questions afterwards or during the presentation. Thank you, Helen. Welcome. Oh, Georgie. Go on, Georgie. Georgie wants to jump in. Go on, Georgie.
Thank you. I'd just like to start by saying how excited we are to bring our youth strategy to you in line with the change nationally around youth expectation. It is ambitious, but you know, why shouldn't it be? For the young people of Powys, we are very excited to offer the best youth provision we can, and we accept that this will happen over a period of time. But we are really keen to share with you today the vision behind the strategy and the next steps we've considered, and really why we've come to the point that we needed to go back and look at the Powys youth strategy. So, diolch yn fawr, thank you.
Thanks, Georgie. It was jumping, Helen. Over to you now, if that's okay.
Lovely, thank you, Chair. And I'm hoping that my presentation will come up very shortly. If you could tell me if my presentation comes up. Can you see? You can. Right, lovely, sure. Thank you. Well, pronounced R, everybody. Good afternoon. My name is Helen Quarrell, and I'm the Inclusion Manager for the Integrated Youth Service. I've been in post since the end of January 2023. However, I've been in the youth service for over 18 years. Doesn't feel like that. Thank you for allowing me the time today to speak to you about the draft strategy before we go out to wider engagement with young people and other stakeholders. The purpose of the new strategy is to strengthen the youth work offer, as Georgie said, and this will be carried out in sorry, I haven't moved my presentation on, I'm sorry. Can you see the second slide? I'll try and do both. This will be carried out in the following 6 areas: emphasising and improving the role and voice of the young person, What young people have to say and enabling them to have a voice is important. Developing relationships and trust with young people, partners and other organisations will help reinforce the offer and widen the scope of opportunity. Provide information and signposting where appropriate. Often young people need additional support, and it's important to understand what resources are available and how this can be accessed. Through improved planning, monitoring and evaluation, we'll be able to ensure we are delivering a quality service across Powys and provide assurance where necessary. To ensure we are providing sufficient services across Powys that are equitable and including a more cohesive needs-led menu of provision. This is the current delivery. This is what we have at the moment. And the current delivery model is not providing the integration that we desire. However, the strategy outlines the proposal for a more integrated provision that covers the whole of Powys. The proposed changes in the strategy aim to give a more comprehensive offer of support and a clearer direction. The strategy will enable us to support young people to develop holistically, work with them to facilitate their personal, social and educational development in a non-formal way, and to develop their voice, influence and place in society and to reach their full potential. There's a bit of a lag when I'm trying to change the slides, so I apologise for that.
It's absolutely fine, Helen. It's okay.
The vision for the Integrated Youth Service is inspiring young people of Powys through outstanding youth work to reach their potential and make a positive transition into adulthood. The strategy will enable us to have equity for young people and equity for the service, have a greater understanding of the role of youth worker and the community that they serve, and establish an appropriate structure to realise the strategy and vision. And it is aspirational, but I think young people deserve that. There are 6 key principles of an effective youth service, and these are a youth-led service where young people's voices are central to the provision. And through voluntary engagement, we can't force them to engage with us and tell us what they want, but we will encourage them. Inclusivity, equality and diversity. Respect. So I think young people deserve respect. Quality, safety and well-being. Empowerment. And definitely, as Georgie has alluded to earlier on, positivity. I think we need to be positive around young people and the offer that we give them. This is an exciting time for the youth service, and the new strategy will give us a direction and a delivery to be proud of. The youth service will endeavour to support the stronger, fairer, greener council priorities. Having said about positivity, there are challenges, and there isn't a service or a department across the council that aren't facing challenges at the moment, and the youth service is no exception. And we are looking at these challenges, and we're going to use these challenges to see how we can strengthen the service moving forward. I want to align roles, expectations and reduce the variability in the service. There are differences in experience, expertise, pay scales and contracts, which is itself leading to difficulties in terms of recruitment and retention. Funding. Can I bring Georgie in here about funding?
Well, thank you, Helen. Funding for the youth service is so often linked to grants. And one of the biggest challenges there is around how we continue to ensure those grants give us value for money, but enable a sustainable youth provision. So as a council, as a cabinet, we're very passionate that our youth services is a key delivery model that we need and we need to maintain. And when we've looked at potential future savings, it has been categorically acknowledged that there should be none from within the base youth provisions. So from our perspective, it is a significant priority for us, but one of the biggest challenges is the fact that so much of the service is from funding from different avenues, either from commissioning, and it's linked to then specific members of having in positions. We've also got set grants that we access. We've recently had a successful SPF bid as well, which we were waiting on to ensure that we could have the relevant structure to fulfill the realisation of this strategy. So the funding element is quite a challenge for the youth service particularly, and it's just worth everybody being aware of what that looks like on a weekly basis and how we're managing that, because they do all come with different terms and conditions.
Thank you,
Thanks,
Georgie.
Helen.
The service aims to be part of the team around the family and supporting the community. Often young people will open up to youth workers and ask for help when they don't ask from anyone else. Young people are presenting with more complex issues in the post-COVID environment, in some cases lacking emotional and social development, compacted with anxiety, and this is having a real impact on their well-being. As highlighted above, recruitment and retention of staff is difficult, and the impact of this is being seen locally, but also nationally. In order to improve the ongoing evaluation of our service, our aim is to improve the collection of an analysis of data to ensure the service is effective. Our corporate and business support would be pivotal to this. Communication between services is variable, and the strategy will support us to reinforce effective collaborative work with external partners such as PAVO. Our waiting lists and referrals are a real challenge. We have seen a huge increase in demand, and we are working with partners to resolve the issues. Next steps. We've started work around many of the areas outlined in the strategy, but these are our next steps. To develop one service, bringing the teams together to deliver a cohesive and responsive programme of support, with one manager to coordinate the provision and implement the strategy. There will be extensive engagement to ensure this strategy is for all young people, staff and partners, improving the provision in the community where young people live. A more robust, honest self-evaluation. It's important for us to know what we are doing well, but it's also important for us to know where we can improve. And young people are very brutally honest sometimes when they don't like something or they don't like what we're doing. So we take that on board. The voice of the young person is very important to us and a key to improving our youth work offer. As I said previously, improving the data collection, report and feedback, enable us to analyse the data, map and gap the provision effectively. Improve promotion and marketing, basically so people know who we are and what we do. It's really important that. Improve sustainability of the service, secure funding that enables us to keep trained professionals within the team. And support voluntary sector service provision. Establish and support new voluntary youth groups across the county to support young people where there's no access to a youth worker or a safe space for young people to go and be young people. There are some voluntary groups across the county which we have supported, but with the shared prosperity funding, we aim to support more. And I've recently today had a request for some support. So, you know, it is really important that we have that ability to support those voluntary groups. I wanted just to be really cheeky here and pop in some good news stories from our team, because I think it's really important for people to know what's going well. The detached team had a commendation at this year's Staff Awards. We are currently about to embark on the Royal Welsh Show, where we start at we start at 8 in the evening, and we finish at 3 or 4 in the morning. And I hesitated there because of the thought of it having to do 5 nights of those shifts is quite tough. But if anybody wants to pop along to the Grow car park, you'll see a massive pop-up tent, and it'll be full of youth workers supporting young people throughout the night. Our summer programme is limited this year due to funding, but we are delivering something across the 5 market towns during the 6 weeks, and young people from the rural areas can access that provision. We have appointed a Equality to Engagement Young People's Officer in the team, who is working closely with the Corporate Equalities Officer to ensure young people have a voice. She's also developing and delivering workshops and training for staff and young people in schools and in community projects. We were awarded the Bronze Quality Mark, and our Silver Submission for silver level will hopefully be sent in January 24. If anybody wants to know anything more about what we do, I'm happy to send some links from our social media pages. You'll be pleased to know this is the last slide, and I'll just leave that quote there. The youth of today are the leaders of tomorrow. And I think this is really relevant to why I'm talking to you today. The young people we work with are the future of Powys, and we need to support them to make informed choices about their future, ensuring we support them to realise their potential and to follow the path that is right for them. Thank you for your time today. And does anybody have any questions?
Thank you, Helen. And a really whistle-top tour through the youth service. And
yes, I'm sorry it was very quick.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely fine. And it certainly adds a bit of clarity to some of the questioning that we had in our pre-meet. I thank you for that. Members, we're open to questions, anything you're unsure of. It's a very aspirational document. It really is. There's no doubt in that. I know members will ask you questions now that, you know, can we achieve these things? But Margaret's put her hand up. Margaret, you're first up, and Sue afterwards, please. Councillor Sue. Margaret? You seem to have disappeared, Margaret. Are you still with us? Yes, you are. Your microphone, Margaret, and we'll be away. A bit of difficulty there. We are watching you.
I'm waiting for the question.
Don't worry, Margaret.
Sorry about that.
Go.
That's all right.
I mean, I was fascinated. I'm really interested. Thank you. And it's so good to hear what you're planning. But I suppose I go back and I haven't heard anything since. I don't know what baseline even I'm working from, purely because I wasn't able to come to the pre-meeting this week. I'm sorry. So it was probably all said then. But I go back to Liz Patterson days when we used to almost annually have a bit of an update about the youth provision at some stage in Scrutiny, so that you sort of kept aware of developments, which was very helpful. Well, of course, since then we've had COVID and lots of things have happened. And the last time that I remember discussing anything about youth service was when it was decimated a few years ago, when everything went, basically, or an awful lot went. And I've not heard anything since. So from the point of view of looking at everything and the extensive document that came with the original papers, I suppose I wondered what baseline we were working from now, from the point of view of where are we at now, and, you know, to work on from that. And one, I looked at the staffing and I thought, well, is that adequate? Have we got enough? There were all those questions. And I thought, if we're looking at improvements, which is the sort of vision you've got, have we got a clear baseline to see the developments? Because it's all looks so exciting and so important.
Yeah, I think it's a great question, Margaret. It's something we didn't develop the other day. What is the measuring stick, Helen, Georgie? How do we know we're going in the right direction?
We certainly will have feedback from everybody, really, in terms of young people to staff to, and I'm more than happy to come and speak to members and give members updates on where we are and how we're going and what we're doing. But certainly our baseline is that we've got professional, qualified youth workers at the base of all of this. And I think that's a really important point.
Right. And so there will be a measure so that it is, you can demonstrate to outside bodies or anybody that the progress that has been made, because funding is linked key to many things, isn't it?
I think Georgie's coming in to help with this.
Val, thank you. Yes, Councillor Margaret, one of the things is, as part of the self-evaluation, we have identified that teams at times are working in silos. So we're not sharing the expertise across the service as best we could. Certain teams have had acknowledgement, compliments. So we need to look at what that's been for, why that's got that recognition. The data that Helen alluded to, we have limited data nationally. NEETs is one of the things, but for us in Powys, that's not a big figure. So it's more about the detail behind those NEETs and what that looks like. Coming back to the point about the ambitiousness and the long game, we're in the process of developing a community schools model, and the youth service would be a key part of that community schools model, and what that looks like and how we can integrate that service through their work directly with schools and with the school service around family support as well. So it's the data that we will collect along the way to constantly enable that really robust self-evaluation. And I think, the new national agenda, the new national youth strategy has identified some of those key things, and they'll be looking at that nationally, won't they, Helen, around data capture processes, which can feed into us.
Yeah, absolutely, Georgie, thank you.
And the other sort of aside to that, really, and then I will shut up, sorry. Self-assessment you mentioned, and obviously that's vital as it moves forward. But it's the scale and scope of self-assessment, because you have many stakeholders who need a voice in that. And I just wondered how you're planning to capture that voice. Young people, definitely, but there are a lot of other people's voices to be captured in that self-assessment process. And because that is another key element, isn't it, of moving forward and progressing the exciting the exciting structure and development that you expressed.
Absolutely, and I think in terms of young people, engaging with young people is the most important part for us. So we will make sure that our Equalities and Engagement Officer, Young People's Officer, will be part of that, and we will reach out to as many young people as we can to ask how we're doing and what their thoughts are. But in terms of stakeholders, I'm going to do certainly be sharing the document with everybody. We've developed a Microsoft Teams form, which is with translation at the moment, and that will help us gather the data that we need in terms of the strategy. But moving forward, we will be speaking to stakeholders on a regular basis.
And we've got parents very much and people like that, they all need to feed in, don't they? Very much so.
I'm hoping there won't be anybody that hasn't seen it, so that's a big promise, but I want people to see it, and I want people to be involved in it. It's not my strategy, it's not just my vision. I think it's a vision for everybody and a strategy for everybody.
Yeah, thank you.
Has that answered?
Yes,
yeah, I think we are where we are. Councillor Sue indicated before you, Councillor David, so we're going to Councillor Sue first.
Apologies for me, I also missed the pre-meeting, but I was coming back from holiday, Chair, so apologies for that. I've got two observations and a question really for Helen. The first observation was just another congratulations to see the medium-sized team having the award with the staff awards. That was really lovely, and I'm sure it went a long way to that team. They were a small team, and what they've achieved is exemplary. And the second observation, I really hope you do obtain the Silver Mark Award when that one comes around for you. I really hope you're successful there. The question really for me is, you're talking about recruitment into key posts. Well, we all know how hard it is to recruit into key posts in Powys. Sometimes it's impossible. But I was wondering, do we go down the route the same as social services do, where we sort of grow our own, Helen? Do we get the young ones coming up And are we able to recruit them into key posts as and when the time comes? Or do we have difficulty there?
Sorry to talk over you there. Yes, we do have an issue with recruitment, and that's locally and nationally, as I said in my presentation. And I'm part of a principal youth officer group, and we're all looking at how we can make you know, the youth work roles more attractive to people, especially in Powys. But yes, we do grow our own. Many of the team that I've got in the open access team, the community team, they started as volunteers in a youth club, 6 hours a week, and then they joined us as a member of staff, went on to training. They did the level 2, the level 3, and actually some of them have now have their degrees and they're qualified youth workers. So we do very much do that in terms of growing our own. And I think then they become part of the service and grow within the service. So I think, yeah, that's very much a route. But recruitment is difficult, but we are trying our best to find the right candidates for the right posts. And I think you know, we will start that process right now with the vacant posts that we have.
Good. And you know, Helen, I hope in the future maybe you can bring that back to Scrutiny to see if you're successful there. It would be good to follow that through.
Definitely, and most definitely will. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair.
Councillor David.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. And I think Helen is a classic of grow your own, Chair. Having been involved in the youth service for so long and reached the position that she has. So well done, Helen, on that one. I just wondered, you referred to links with the YFC and the Earth. What about your links with the Scouts and the Guides? I was one time a YFC member, and I actually was also involved in the Scout movement as an assistant leader. And I just wondered what involvement you've got with them.
Thank you, Councillor Meredith, for your kind words. It is limited in terms of the uniformed groups. However, we have got some young people who come to us that also go to the uniform groups. So we have that connection there. But I think that is something that we need to look into because they're all part of the community, and I'd like to work closely together with all groups in the community that that work with young people. So that's something we can develop.
And also, just on the Duke of Edinburgh's award, is there much involvement with the Duke of Edinburgh's award by the youth clubs that are going in existence?
The as you know, Duke of Edinburgh was with us for a very long time, but we do support the Duke of Edinburgh through schools and through youth clubs. So we have a lot of volunteering opportunities that come through the youth club. So young people can come and do their hours that they need to for the voluntary section of the DofE. And yes, so there are options, and we do support the DofE without going into too much detail and waffling on, sorry.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Gareth Jones, followed by Councillor Glynn, please.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Helen, for everything you said. What a great presentation. But I think it's been touched upon that to achieve all that, we're going to need a great deal of resource, which unfortunately we don't have. But it's very reassuring to hear that no further cuts from the youth support are intended. Well, it's possibly not cuts, it's more money injected into it. We need to achieve this, as you correctly said, the youth for our future. And I was led to believe that the Earth were having no money off us now. Perhaps I could be corrected on that. But if I could just touch upon the YFC, and I have got strong links to the YFC. They're a big movement. 1,800, 2,000 Powys currently operating. There are other great groups as well, but I'm only going to talk about YFC because that's what my knowledge is. They are struggling to kind of keep that level of support, level of education going throughout Powys currently. And it's already set up, and I'd urge you to look at how we can use them more. About 3 or 4 years ago, I believe the YFCs were supplying data to go to Welsh Government to attract grants. I believe that is still the case. And there's others of the YFC, as David said, there's Scouts. But look at what we've already got. and let's make best use of what is already working, that if we don't support it, may not be so successful in the future. I have got another point, Chair, if I may, after that. But the ERF, do they get support?
They do, Councillor Gareth, they do. And we do support the ERF and the YFC through the youth support grant. It is quite a substantial amount. And we do, it's for emotional health and wellbeing money for YFC, and then the Welsh language provision in the rural area for the ERF. So they do, and they do provide us with data, which then goes back to Welsh Government. And we have quarterly reports which come in to myself, and we do some compliance meetings as well, which I'm just about to arrange with the coordinators, with the three coordinators.
Right, Gareth, you coming back?
Yeah, please, just thank you for that. And just on another kind of, hopefully a kind of a good news story. Llanfairpwllgwyngyllgogerychwr, we've just set up a new youth club, and it's been operational now for a number of weeks. It's been very successful, and we applied for a grant through Awards from Wales, got a significant grant over 2 years. So if possible, that could be shared with other towns, villages throughout the county, to show that there is funding through other avenues, through other channels that could help establish youth clubs, which sadly have declined over recent years. And if anybody wanted the information, I'd be happy to get some more from our town council. But yeah, good news, and there is funding out there if we know all where to look for it. Thank you, Chair.
Yeah, Councillor Glynn, and if you'd let me come in there, Helen, first. I'd be interested to know now that is this something the youth service in Powys is aware of? Will they be picking up the work of Llanfairpwllgwyngyllgogerychwr? Is there any connection established? Or I'm interested in that, Helen, if you could, before you answer.
Yeah, absolutely. We were successful with the Shared Prosperity Fund, and there is a pot of money within that fund that is ring-fenced for voluntary clubs. So I will be reaching out to groups of people who are already established, as you say, have started their journey on the voluntary groups, but also asking, as I said in my presentation, I had a request today from Llanidloes to have some support to open a youth group there. So yeah, we will be supporting voluntary groups where we haven't got the Powys County Council youth clubs.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Glynn.
You know, it's really interesting, Helen, that you mentioned Llanidloes, because obviously I'm a local member for Llanidloes. I don't want to get into the weeds of the specific issues, but just on that pot of money that you've bid for, that's, you know, you've got part of it ring fenced for voluntary run clubs. Just wondering whether there are any restrictions on how that money is spent. You know, what sort of things might that pot of money be able to be used for? I know in particular, you know, I know this is a specific point, but I'm sure this is a generality that would be the same across Powys. But, you know, the issue of location is really tricky. You know, where are you actually going to situate this and how you're going to fund that?
Yeah, and I absolutely understand. We've had that issue in the past. Where do we open the club? Where do we run the club from? And the pot of money is for setup and delivery. So I will put together some information and send it out to everybody to see.
That's really helpful. Thank you ever so much. And it'd be helpful for us as local members in that, you know, I've received lots of correspondence on that. So just as a wider point, I suppose, you know, the strategy is really commendable, and, you know, there's nothing in there that I can obviously critique in any kind of way. But I suppose that the thing that I'm kind of trying to understand a little bit more is what's currently being delivered and what's on offer. So in terms of those 5 market towns where there's a Powys County Council run youth centre, you know, how many children are being engaged in those youth centres? And then equally, what about those market towns where there isn't a PCC youth centre? How many children are being engaged in other ways by the youth service?
Okay, I'll try and answer that. On my slide, I had the current delivery. So we've got 5 market towns where there's a youth club, and that's Welshpool, Newtown, and working down the county, Llyn-Dryndod, Estragon, Lais and Brecon. So I've sort of popped up and popped back down. But yeah, the numbers of young people range from 50 to 100, and we're open 2 nights a week. So sort of post-COVID, the numbers were very slow to start off with. And now, and I'm quite happy to share links of our social media posts as well, so that you can see that my youth workers always put up numbers, what they've been doing, how they've been doing it. So that might actually give you as members a little insight into what we do and how we do it as well. I think that would help.
I think that would help a great deal, really, because I think that's what we're asking the question, Helen, and it's not a disrespectful question. We're truly supportive of the document, and we just want to see is it working. So, you know, and that would be a useful exercise if we could see that data. Glyn's wishing to come back. Sorry, Glyn, I was stealing your thunder.
No, not at all. No, I'm really grateful, and that, you know, that's really commendable. And those that, you know, I'll be totally honest, those numbers are higher than what I was expecting. I suppose that just that my second point about, you know, where there are towns where there are no Powys County Council run youth centres, how many kids are being engaged by the youth service elsewhere, whether that be via the school. You know, we heard Georgie talk about the community schools approach, and whether that's, you know, I'm just wondering, you know, how many of these children are having access to that service at all. So, you know, you can use Llanidloes as an example, if you like, in that we haven't a PCC run youth centre here at the moment.
You haven't, but you've got a youth worker, an open access youth worker in the school who works with young people in groups. You've also got a youth intervention worker who goes in and works on referral base with young people who need more of a one-to-one support. We've also got a 16+ team, the detached team, and they work with young people in the community. So there is provision for young people in those other areas. However, it's not necessarily in a youth club setting.
No, it's good to hear. Georgie, I've been holding you back for some time now. I do apologise.
No problems at all, Jochen Bauer. Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to come in on Gareth's point around the funding of the strategy, and we're at the point now that Helen's worked really hard to ensure that there's the structure to realise that strategy, and that's within our budget. In addition, we've built into that positions of somebody there to support with the administration around grants, so not only the monitoring but also the applications of additional grants and working with other communities to see what we can further secure to support the team and grow it. So that's been part of the work that Helen's been doing to not only get the strategy to a point, we want it out for consultation, but really looking at the numbers as to what we can do in the first instance to enable the realisation of that strategy. So I just want, in regard to your question there, Councillor Gareth, around the funding, it is where we are, but we also are looking to secure more funding as we move forward through those additional posts, or that additional post.
Thank you, Georgie. Councillor Abbott.
Thank you, and apologies, Chair, that I was late. I got distracted by a phone call. And thank you again, Helen. You know, the really important bit of this again is right at the very end of what happens next. Have you got timescales? Apologies if you've covered that when I wasn't there at the start of the meeting. I've got timescales to some of that future work going forward. Quick questions. I haven't heard of uniformed groups described as uniformed groups before. Has there been a problem with supporting uniformed groups in the past, or is it perhaps I was just reading into it something that it wasn't there? And also, Glyn's touched on it, is that access to those deep rural areas. You know, from my part of the world to the nearest sort of youth club is 40 miles round trip. That's never going to happen, especially when the youth clubs are focused at those probably most deprived, or you know, the families that face the greatest challenge. So, you know, working with, as Gareth said, really important to work with local clubs. My only problem is with, you're talking about setup, helping with the setup, a pot of money to help with that. but a lot of existing small ones are really struggling at the moment. Really small scouts group or really small Aylwyd in an area, and they, you know, there's a structure there already, and they just need that little bit of revenue funding to keep them going. So that's, I'd like to see some focus on that as well, really. It would be good to have an indication of your budgets as well at some point, how much you spend on certain elements of your delivery. And the pot of money you was talking about, the one from UK government, etc. What sort of values have you got? So to give me some sort of indication of how much work you could potentially do with that pot of money. Thank you, Helen.
Lots of questions there, Helen. I could see you noting them down, but let's see if you can have a go at that.
I'm not sure really where to start. Georgie,
sorry, yeah, I should have broken it down. Apologies.
No, that's okay. That's okay. I've written many of them down, but I think some of them we don't have answers for today, but we can come back to you with those answers. In terms of the uniform groups, I apologise if that's not what people call them, but that's what.
It might be just me. I don't know.
But I know we sort of use that as a sort of distinguished label in terms or you know, suggestion, and that's what we call them, because we don't have uniforms. Young people come as they are, so it was just to distinguish today between that. In terms of the SPF funding and the voluntary groups, I'll be looking at that in closer detail now from today, and we'll look at that setup and delivery. So whether we can split that down, and those who are already set up, whether they can have some of that funding in terms of to sustain what they're already doing.
Yeah.
Can I come in, Helen?
Yes, I'm glad you. Yes, thank you.
Okay, so as I've sort of alluded to, it's quite a complex picture funding within the youth service. We have base, we have grants, and we have different sections there. And all of those grants do come with different T's and C's. So we are working quite closely with the accountants regarding all of those elements, as you would expect. I think one of the things around timescales is that we've obviously had to go to we'll have to go to consultation on the strategy, then the structure that will be in place, and once that is then all agreed, we can move forward with the work. So that's where we are a little bit around the next steps with the timeframes. I just want to bring in the example of one of the pilots we've done, which is the Hay on Wye youth club, because again that was to support those potential young people that couldn't get to one of those 5 centres, and we've worked really closely there, haven't we, with a voluntary group. Have I got it right, as well as Pavo, Helen? I'm just double checking that we've done that.
Definitely, right at the very beginning, Councillor Gareth Ratcliffe came to me and asked, how does he do it, what does he need to do? So I supported him with documentation, how to set up, and he's got a great group of youth workers there now, some qualified, some not, and we will be obviously again offering training for those voluntary groups in level 2 and level 3 youth work qualifications, which we already put on for our team, so we'll open it up to the voluntary groups.
Thank you, Helen. So in terms of, we can bring the budget, Councillor Allen, if that's wanted, but we can't tell you today what the figures are within each zone. It is a complex picture, the grant picture that sits behind youth.
Yeah, I appreciate the being funded through grants. I don't know, probably mostly grants you receive, Helen, as well. It's almost impossible to have that long-term sustainability and long-term planning, which it must make it so difficult for you. But when it comes to timescales, I'm just talking in a 6 months period. In this time next year, where would you hope to be? Would you be stand to deliver on this strategy, or would you still be preparing your strategy?
Shall I go? Yeah, no, I'd like to be up and running before then. I'd like to have that consultation period done, the strategy done, staff in place, and helping and supporting young people. And again, that may feel aspirational, but I think we've got to work at pace and I think we owe it to the young people of Powys to support them.
Yeah, no, that's
Thank you. Can I suggest to Chair, you might put an invite in the diary for
yeah, no, yeah, no, exactly. That is the purpose. And Aled, you're asking some great questions today, but some of them questions we are scrutinised in the document today and the vision, and that's what we need to say. And I think it's relevant. Okay. We've been asking for data. We as a councillors are trying to understand how you can implement this. And yes, I think right from the off we complimented you on your aspiration, and rightly so. And we're not being negative, but we are actually wondering how you can actually get onto the ground. I'm going to develop Councillor Garrett's question a little bit on YFC. I declare an interest that I came through the YFC route, but I'm not a member or an official in the organisation now. But I've always felt that Powys Youth Services weren't quite, even though there was considerable funding years ago, that funding's been cut now. In some cases, and I'm not being rude about this, we piggyback onto YFC and use the data they capture to strengthen our youth services. So I'm going to turn it the other way around. If you went to, and you know, if you go to Dover, Dolly, wherever you go, they're run by voluntary leaders with very little qualifications. They're elected in an AGM, and you say, who wants to be chairman? And that person has to take that chairman, and that chairman can be as young as 16 on times, or even younger. And that chairman has to run a club how he or she fits, with the help of an advisory committee. I want to know how a Powys youth worker can engage with those clubs to help them, because with no disrespect to some of them YFC officials, they've got no expertise in sexual health, mental health, nothing like that. And that's where I want to see the reach. We've got an organisation there which we can piggyback on, for the use of better words, but beyond that again, and we've mentioned rural areas, but there's many rural areas where we can't reach out into those young people. Aled mentioned 40 miles from his nearest youth group, but I could bring Aled back and say, well, look, it's actually 10 miles to your nearest YFC group. So I think there's a great opportunity there to reach out to them. And I'm not being disrespectful, but I don't think Powys Youth Services get into YFC as much as they should. Maybe YFC don't want you in there as much as they should, but to develop that expertise, like sexual health, mental health, whatever it is, I don't think that's there, and that's what I'd like to see the policy document express. And I'm using YFC because I know YFC, that's there with the uniform groups, whatever. So I just wonder how we can go that one step further. In some respects, we think they're doing all right, but they're concentrating on their program of poultry trussing, entertainment festivals. They don't touch on to anything else. And yet once a year, they probably get a questionnaire where they say, oh, do you think you're doing this? Do you think you're doing that? Do you think you're doing this? And that's great data capturing, but I've sat there and ticked a box myself and I didn't quite know what I was answering. So yes, so is there somewhere that we can develop that further? That's all I'm saying. And yes,
I'm glad you came in with that, that's the chair, because I had forgotten to say that our equalities and engagement officer, Jess Metcalf, has reached out to each of the YFC federations and is meeting the coordinators very soon, when I think when the Royal Welsh is finished. And she's looking at developing a programme of engagement, but also training. So workshops on sexual health, workshops on emotional health and well-being, workshops. We're looking at rolling out the C card with the YFC, with the Powys Teaching Health Board. So we are working very closely with YFC, and I'm absolutely happy to say that, you know, we will develop that further with the help of Jess.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely great to hear, and I'm going to add to that now, because I think it's important that COVID, young people do have more mental health problems than they did before. It is a fact. Suicides are higher. So are we reaching out into other stakeholders like mental health charities, etc., etc., etc.? I'm going to be blunt with you. I'm a trustee of the DPJ Foundation, I've never once, and maybe it's an initiative which the DPJ should take, I've never once seen any communication from Powys Youth Services, and DPJ is actually working in that sector, concentrating. One of their biggest clients, for the better word, is the 16 to 26-year-old, if you like. So we need to work harder there as well.
Absolutely, and the DPJ Foundation have been working very closely with YFC, and I think you're absolutely right. We do need to develop that relationship further, and I think that will form part of our strategy.
Right, good to hear. Good to hear. Members, we've had a good hearing. Is there any other pressing points or questions? No. Good. Helen, thank you very much for joining us. Georgie, thanks for helping Helen with this. And if there's any other officers in the background listening in, we do really appreciate what you're doing. I think you'll guess that we're passionate about our youth. I guess that's why we sit on education committees, really. But yeah, keep up the good work. And please, we will ask you to return. And it goes back to Margaret's very first question. We want to see it in operation, and that would certainly satisfy this aspirational document which you put in place. So yeah, no, great work, and great that you're recognising the importance of youth in our society. So great, thank you.
Thank you for your time today.
Yeah, just before we finish, do we have, I can't remember what the terminology for it, there was one in the previous council, was a youth champion. Do you have a youth champion amongst our councillors now or not? I know you have health champions, etc. Do we have a youth champion? Okay, that's something which
something to look into.
Yeah, well, that's something for the portfolio holders listening in. You've got champions in other sectors. Maybe you need something in this sector. I don't know if it'll help, but certainly, Councillor Danny's coming in.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just wonder if you could enlighten me what a youth champion is, please.
Okay. Well, a champion is somebody who would carry the banner for. We've got a champion. I think Joy Jones is the social care champion, so she carries the banner, if you like, and champions things which go on in that sector. So I think it would be useful if we had a champion in the youth sector who could perhaps highlight certain things which are happening, but also jig along things as well, and somebody for fellow members to go to and say, well, look, we don't think this is happening in the youth service. Could you follow it up for us and have a certain knowledge on the youth service? So that's my take on it. I don't know if one of the portfolios have got it any different, but we do have champions in different sectors, and it was just an idea which I thought might help progress our youth services or highlight our youth services in Powys. So
definitely,
yep.
Chair, and I think that's something that we will. I will speak to our Equalities and Engagement Officer, and we will develop that in, and we will also link with the Junior Startwell Board. I think that's really important, and that we involve the Junior Startwell Board and develop a champion from there, maybe.
Great stuff. Thank you, Helen. Once again, thanks for joining us. Really appreciative of you taking your time. So thank you. Members, we are almost an hour into our meeting. Is there anybody that desires a break, or do you wish to proceed? Okay, we'll carry on, shall we? Good. We move on now to item 6 on our agenda, additional learning needs. We've got Mr. Simon Anderson with us today, an inclusion manager in the school service. Members, it's something that we've already had slight discussion on, and I'm going to ask Councillor Pete if he would to introduce and take us through the direction of which we're going today, please. Thank you, Councillor Pete.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to welcome this opportunity to bring members of the ALN team in front of you. We're at quite a crucial stage in the implementation of the ALN Act, and whilst we've got a lot of our back office in order and are doing really well on the migration to statements, we are now starting to find that there are issues away from the centre that are coming more to the fore. So what I've got Simon Anderson and Karen Jenkins from the ALN team, and obviously Georgie What they're going to be doing with you today is going to be giving you a detailed introduction into the ALN Act, so that you've got a greater awareness of the challenges the Act presents to us. They're going to touch on what has been done within the authority to date and the recognition that that has received. And then they're going to touch on a few of the issues where they think there are still challenges that need to be addressed, and the areas which they are working on at the moment, so that the entire ALN experience is coming across, as well as the central team's experience of it. So I'm going to pass you across briefly to Georgie, who will formally introduce Karen and Simon and set any scene that she wants to set first.
Diolch yn fawr, Councillor Pete, thank you. Yep, as we all know, the ALNet was introduced a period of time ago. Schools are finding their feet with that. Some of the things that we're going to talk to you about today are the strengths of the processes and systems, elements of information that we've captured from our head teachers and our various stakeholders regarding the next steps in response to the strategy. And furthermore, also talk about how collectively we're trying to move the system forward, including elements of the strategy that was written pre-COVID. And we all know we're in a very different world now. So Simon and Karen are here because the ALN manager is not in work at the moment. So they'll be talking through the presentation and slides. Ideally, it'd be easier if the questions come at the end, but ultimately, obviously, Councillor Wimble, that's your call as the chair. But just to try and make sure they can share all of the information that they've spent quite a bit of time gathering for this today, and share with you where we are on our ALN improvement journey. And it is an improvement journey, and we are well aware of that. So diolch yn fawr, thank you.
Well, more than happy. Welcome, Simon and Karen. More than happy to take questions at the end. I am looking to finish the meeting. I know we're scheduled for 4:30, but I certainly don't want to go any longer than that. But if we can get in a position where we can finish at 4, that would be absolutely great as well. So yeah, plenty of time of questions at the end. So Simon, Karen, more than happy for you to proceed.
Thank you, Councillor Thomas. I'll just share the presentation if that's okay.
Yeah, go for it.
Okay. So thank you very much for giving us the opportunity to come and talk to you today. As Georgie and Councillor Pete mentioned, it's a vast piece of work that's happening across Wales, and we thought we'd give you an update or an overview, a quick overview of what's entailed within the transformation to ALNet, and then where we are in Paris. So I'm just going to come in and do the first couple of slides and talk about transformation in general, and then some numbers that we have in Paris, which may put things in context. So the Act we're talking about is the Additional Learning Needs and Education Tribunal Wales Act 2018. It gained royal assent in 2018, but as you will be aware, with the pandemic, it was delayed by a year. So actually, it started in being implemented in September 2021. Alongside the legislation, alongside the Act, there is a code, which is a statutory code, and that was published in 2021. So we are in implementation phase, and we are currently using 2 separate systems. So we're currently using the special educational needs system, and we're also using the additional learning needs system. And that creates its own challenges in itself. Some children and young people in Paris are on the old system. Some children and young people have transitioned to the new system, and some people have started out on the new system. So it's quite a multifaceted approach, but we are smack bang in the middle of the implementation. The implementation has been extended a couple of times, as I mentioned, firstly because of the pandemic, but also more recently, there's been an additional year added to the implementation timeline. This is largely around the feedback that we've presented as local authorities across Wales to Welsh Government, and the pressure that it's putting on schools, and in particular ALNCOs, in the conversions of all of the statutory paperwork. But we'll talk about those in a bit. So Fundamentally, there's a change in name. We're moving from SEN to ALN, but it's much, much more than that. The Act is about changing the perceptions, changing the ethos around inclusion and additional learning needs across Wales. So it's really looking fundamentally at how we make sure that we're identifying need, we're acting on that identification as soon as possible, and we're ensuring that everything we're doing is done in a person-centred approach. One of the biggest changes in the system is the creation of a unified plan. We currently have 3 separate documents within the SEN system. Within the ALN system, we will have one unifying plan, which is going to be known as an individual development plan, or IDP. And the IDP will be a statutory document with the premise that all agencies working with a child or a young person will input into that plan. And there are statutory obligations on people who have agreed to provide services to that young person within that plan. Another tenet of the Act is that there's much more increased participation of children, young people and their families. Again, using that person-centred approach. Our schools in Powys are very good at person-centred working, and they've been working through a person-centred way for quite a long time now. And we continue to offer update training on that as a local authority when it needs to be updated. Disagreement resolution at an early stage is a priority as the new Act. So ensuring that we're listening to what parents and families are saying to us, young people are saying to us, and trying to reach an agreement before it gets to a stage where we have to go to tribunal for a resolution. I mentioned about increased collaboration as part of the unified plan, but also about information sharing. So ensuring that no one agency is working in silo, that every agency is able to input into the support for children and young people and their families. The Act also makes sure that there's clear and consistent rights of appeal for children, young people and their families. And there is also the ability for children to nominate somebody to represent them within tribunal if that's appropriate. I mentioned the mandatory code. The difference between the SEN code of practice and the ALN code is that the ALN code is statutory. The SEN code of practice was just that, code of practice. It was advisory. The code is statutory, and it details what every agency, so local authorities, schools, further education institutes, NHS, social care should be doing to meet the educational needs of children and young people with ALM. The code also ensures that there is equal rights in terms of language. So should children and families need provision provided in Welsh or assessments and resources provided in Welsh, there should be no delay in providing those. In addition, the age range has changed, and where the previous statutory documents and legislation went up to the age of 16 or 19 within special schools, the new documentation and legislation goes up to the age of 25. That doesn't mean there's continuous education up to the age of 25. It just means that there is an entitlement to a certain amount of education for a young person, and that ceases when they get to 25. So that's a very whistle-stop tour of some of the key tenets of the new Act. One of the biggest challenges is around the statutory tasks. So the converting of those statutory and non-statutory documents over to the new system. On the left-hand side, we've got the current SEN system, and on the right-hand side of the screen, we've got the ALN system. The statements which are at the top of the left-hand side, they are the only statutory document within the SEN legislation. They are owned and maintained by the local authority, and they are for the children and young people with the most complex and severe needs. So, for example, all of our children and young people who attend a special school will have a statement of special educational needs. In the new Act, the local authority must convert all statements over to local authority individual development plans, or IDPs. The addition to that is the early years non-statutory plans. So in the SEN system, children who were not in statutory schooling, so 3+, 2+, they could have an early years action documentation or early years action plus, but that wasn't statutory. Within the new Act, any additional learning need, no matter the level or complexity, is the remit of the local authority, and those children must have a local authority IDP. That does mean that when those children transfer to school, that may mean that their LA IDP transmits to a school IDP. As I said, because the level of need is irrelevant at early years. All early years ALN will have a LA IDP. So the LA are writing those and are responsible for those, and that's added a significant number to LA IDPs. The other two non-statutory documentation within the SEN code is School Action Plus Individual Education Plans, or IEPs, and School Action IEPs. Those have always been the responsibility of the school, and the schools will monitor and evaluate those. In the old system, those weren't statutory. So although, of course, schools would do everything they could to provide that support and provide those resources, there could be no legal challenge to that. In the new Act, those documents, those School Action Plus IEPs and School Action IEPs, will convert to a school IDP, a school individual development plan. And in the new Act, they are statutory. So the schools are, or the governing bodies, I should say, are in charge of ensuring that whatever's written in that school IDP is provided to that child or young person. And then the final level in the new Act, the ULP, or Universal Learning Provision, that's for children who need some kind of support but don't meet the threshold for a school IDP. And those children who have provision under ULP will not have a statutory document, and under the Act are not determined to have an additional learning need. So only children and young people that have a school IDP and an LA IDP are determined to have additional learning needs. I should also say that there are 3 statutory roles that have been insisted upon by Welsh Government within the new code. Those 3 statutory roles are the role of the ALNCO, so the Additional Learning Needs Coordinator. The school has a statutory duty to have a named person whose responsibility it is to be the ALNCO. They must be a qualified teacher, and they must have at least completed their NQT year. And that's in statute, that's in the Act, so that's a responsibility of schools. There is the Early Years Additional Learning Needs Lead Officer, which is another statutory post, but the responsibility of the local authority. And that person's responsibility is to look after all non-statutory school-aged children, keep provision for those children under review, and ensure they're having their ALN needs met across the county. And the final statutory post is the Designated Education Clinical Lead Officer, or DECLO. The DECLO is a statutory role for the Health Board, and it's their role to ensure that the link between education and health is always kept open and provision is reviewed continuously. And just a few numbers really to put in context. So these are the numbers as of June this year for pupils, children and young people who are recorded as having additional learning needs. So there are just over 3,500 learners in our maintained schools being recorded as having an additional learning need. The highest proportion of those children are recorded as having a primary need of behaviour, social and emotional difficulties, or BESD. That doesn't necessarily mean behaviour per se. That could be things to do with well-being, mental health, It could be as a result of the behaviour is a result of a communication need. So it doesn't just mean necessarily a behaviour need. The second highest descriptor are those learners with a primary need of speech, language and communication difficulties. Many of those learners may display traits of autism or ASC, but because they don't have a diagnosis of ASC, they can't be recorded as being ASC. Nearly 500 learners are recorded as having moderate learning difficulties within our schools, our maintained schools. So those may be children and young people who have difficulties with their literacy or numeracy. They may have traits of dyslexia, dyscalculia. They may have DCD or dyspraxia type tendencies. Around 500 are recorded as having MLD. Nearly 400 learners are recorded as having a diagnosis of autism, and then just over 130 learners have a recording as a primary need of ADHD or attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. And of course, ASC, ADHD, Tourette's and tics, those fall under the banner of neurodiversity. So we are seeing an increase in neurodivergent profiles across the county. So that's a whistle-stop tour of just some of the numbers that we're working with in our schools across Powys. We did complete evaluation with our ALNCOs, and we just wanted to present some of the feedback we've had. We've invested heavily in looking at systems and processes, and we're now at the point where we need to move forward with those systems and processes to ensure that what's happening on the ground, what's happening within our schools, what we're being told by head teachers and parents is appropriate to meet the needs of young people and children. One of the things we were told is about access to local authority officers. Of course, we know that having a face-to-face meeting with a local authority officer, whether that's ourselves as inclusion managers, whether that's specialist teachers, is much better in person, and you get much more from that. Unfortunately, we know the geography of Powys doesn't always make that the easiest thing to complete, and actually due to the increase of referrals into the local authority, we do sometimes have to prioritise those. So to assist in that, we've created drop-in sessions. Those have been identified by particularly ALNCOs as a strength. ALNCOs know that at a certain point within their diaries, they can get hold of one of the specialist teachers or one of the TUVI practitioners that we have. However, we are also being told that it's difficult for teachers, ALNCOs, because of their workload, to always get out to make those sessions. So we need to be working with our workforce to ensure that we are doing things that help them, that assist them, that are done at the right times for them. And just because we've got the drop-in sessions now and the feedback we've had is positive, doesn't mean that moving forward it's the right thing. So we need to keep that under review and make sure that it is still working for our workforce. We have a system that we've created as a response to the Act, which we call TUVI. TUVI is our inclusion platform, it's our inclusion system. So there is an electronic system which records all details of a child and young person's ALN needs. It has the access to be able to share with parents, other professionals. It can keep meeting notes, it can keep reports. Everybody who needs to can have access to that. So it's a good way of having person-centered approach to meeting that young person's needs. It's very responsive. Any decisions that are made are instant. And ALNCOs, teachers, head teachers can see those responses instantly. What we have produced is a lot of documentation that will assist teachers and ALNCOs to use the systems. But what we are being informed is that, yes, the documentation is there, but actually there isn't necessarily the time to invest in reading those documents, taking the time to really absorb what they're about. So we understand that there are lots of different ways we need to get those information out to our practitioners. One of the things we have done is videos, so they can drop in and out of those videos and they can use those as training aids. We have also been recognised as from Estyn and Welsh Government as having a system which many other local authorities do not have yet, and as being something that we can share best practice across Wales. We have termly ALNCO forums for all of our ALNCOs. Those forums are now led and guided by ALNCOs. They tell us what they want to discuss. They tell us what training and discussions and networking they want us to take place. We've had lots of specialist speakers. So we've had staff from or practitioners from the speech and language team in Powys Teaching Health Board. They've been along and presented and answered questions. We've had people from the neurodevelopmental team attend. And we've also asked our ALNCOs to help us really firm up what a universal and additional learning provision in Powys looks like. And we're getting them to tell us what's appropriate for schools. It's very well, we can say this is what we think is appropriate, but actually what does it look like on the ground? And is it appropriate on the ground? So ALNCOs are helping us to understand and firm up those decisions. We have regular training and consultations. Our EPs have what we call ALN group consultations. They meet termly with cluster schools, and we also have behaviour consultations and other specialist drop-in sessions where teachers, ALNCOs can meet with specialist practitioners. One of the issues we do have is we have a very small specialist practitioner team. So for instance, at the moment, we only have 4 educational psychologists. For the size of the county, that's quite a small number. That's not for want of trying to recruit. There is a national shortage of educational psychologists across Wales. So we are looking at ways of how we can move forward with that, what joint working can we do, but we know that is a priority for us. We've invested heavily in upskilling and training our ALNCO champions. So we decided that an approach to support ALNCOs in the school would be to provide funding to release what we might call senior ALNCOs, so those ALNCOs who have been ALNCOs for a number of years, those who are experienced in meeting lots of needs within their schools. And we've worked with them to look at what a good IDP will look like, how they can evaluate those IDPs, and then how they can disseminate that knowledge across Powys to the other schools within their clusters. They've also been instrumental in helping us with our conversions. So we've used grant funding in order to release those ALNCO champions from their schools to help us with converting statements over to IDPs. We have a virtual school that's been identified as a strength. The virtual school is for looked after children and is a way of ensuring that the support, education support we're putting in place for those children is appropriate, that their outcomes are monitored effectively, and that we link up with our colleagues in children's services to make sure that we're not working in silo, we're working together. And the system, TUVI, has helped that because we've been able to create virtual personal education plans for those learners. We've provided funding in secondary schools to help with nurture. We realised that wellbeing was a huge issue for lots of our secondary learners in particular, and we looked at how we could support the Nurture programme, so Nurture UK, in supporting our learners with their wellbeing, their mental health, but also then fully accessing education within their mainstream schools. We also have a steering group that looks at what's called vulnerable learners or vulnerable groups of learners. So those are our learners who are children looked after. They are children who are refugees or asylum seeking families. They are GRT children, so Gypsy Roma Traveller children, and looking at the support and engagement we can provide to help them. It's a huge task. And we are getting good feedback from our schools in the support that our vulnerable groups team is providing. I'll pass over to Cara now, who's going to just have a quick conversation about areas that we've recognised for development.
Yeah, Simon. Prynhawn Dar, everybody, and thank you for the invitation this afternoon. Nice to meet you all. So I'll just elaborate on a couple of these points as I go through. So the areas for development that were highlighted through self-evaluation, this doesn't mean this is exhaustive, because as we know, things move very quickly. We've recently had a head teacher conference where we've had even further feedback. So we're always looking to develop, and this is not by any means an exhaustive list. So visiting schools, Simon did touch on. We know, I mean, I was a head teacher right up until December 2022. I've only just come into the role in January full time. So I know how much you get from actually having a visitor into school, rather than just relying on documents, because a child isn't a piece of paper, as we well know. So we are trying our very best to ensure that that happens. We have very recently made the decision to use some of our transformation funding to do two roles. One is to have a case manager that can take some of the casework from myself and Simon, so that as inclusion managers we can get into school more, and also to putting a specialist teacher role, so that this will be temporary, but obviously, you know, this is what we need to do to make sure we can get into schools during this very challenging time of change for everybody. So if we can recruit a specialist teacher, then they will take charge really of the specialist centres. So those schools that have specialist centres, they've informed us that they would like to meet and network like they used to, and that went. So we would reintroduce those network meetings and those regular meetings, and that specialist teacher would actually go into specialist centres regularly to visit them. So we're hoping if we can get that recruitment done in time to use the grant in under the correct T's and C's, then that will support us in being able to visit schools more often. So reducing bureaucracy, we have streamlined processes from the beginning. And it is an ongoing thing. It's new for all of us. This was such a massive piece of change, so that we have streamlined paperwork. We have made things available to schools and to ALNCOs as much as we possibly can. And obviously, this is something that we're ongoing and we'll keep doing. We have taken the role of converting the statements of special educational needs from the schools. Not all local authorities do that, but we have taken that on board ourselves to make sure we've done, and we've done over 100 this year of those mandated years that we've had to convert this year. And we will continue that next year. We have had some amazing support from the ALNCO champions in that, as Simon said. They've been supporting the local authority with some grant funding to release them from schools over the last half term to really get those done, to meet those deadlines. So funding formula, that work is ongoing. We are looking as an ALN team at how schools are funded, because an area that's come to light is that sometimes those schools with very, very high levels of ALN are not necessarily, that's being reflected within that funding formula. So that's a piece of work that's ongoing with, you know, how to do that best as we move forward. ALNCO time, Simon did mention the ALNCO Champions programme. They were recruited last autumn, so they started with us in January. So we've had 2 terms with them. We've had brilliant feedback from them. We're just in the process of a written self-evaluation from them. We've basically upskilled them. They've spent time with EPs, they've spent time with specialist teachers. They've visited specialist centres, they've actually been out physically. So a lot of work has gone into upskilling them. So we're going to keep those same ALNCOs now for another year, and they are now sort of feeding into that programme. They're telling us what their other ALNCOs in their cluster schools want, and we are going to tailor that programme to them to support the schools on the ground. What will come out of that is an ALNCO toolkit. So any ALNCO or aspiring ALNCO, or indeed any member of staff in a school, would be able to have access to everything that those ALNCO champions have produced and have come up with and feel that will support their own schools. So this isn't something that we're doing to them. This is something we're doing very much with them to work with the ALNCOs on the ground. Transition, we acknowledge that the early years transition into school wasn't as smooth as it should have been in the first year of implementation. So we have our early years ALN low and a specialist teacher that works within the early years. That has now been brought into the same team as the specialist teacher for ALN within the local authority, and they're working together. So just in a very, very short time since Easter, that process is much improved. We still have children that move into our local authority last minute. We had one last week that's come in, moved into the local authority, has identified ALN, and obviously then that transition to school needs to be a little bit more highly supported. So so moving forward, that's just going to improve even further, we hope. So that's where we are with that one. ND waiting time, that is brought up quite often. Obviously, that is a health issue rather than us being able to change those waiting times. However, we have tried to make the process smoother for schools. So they basically refer the ND into us, goes onto the TOVI profile, for example. It's very easy, and we pass that then on to the health board. So there isn't any lost questionnaires or posting things off, which is the way we used to do them. So it's all done through the child's electronic profile. So and there's a lot of work. Simon works very closely with the health board on their waiting times, and I know that Councillor Pete might want to mention something about that as well. Training on specific learning difficulties. We are being told more and more that ND, those neurodivergent, that ASD, ADHD needs is where people want that extra professional development. So we're looking, one of our specialist teacher for ALN is now, she's just going on a postgraduate certificate, for example, for ND specific needs. So we're upskilling our own staff so that they can pass on that knowledge. We also have a massive amount of knowledge in our special schools. So Brynllaw Hall, Cydawen and Penmaes all have very highly trained staff. So we are hoping to use them then to help that professional development of schools and staff. And then slow turnaround of statement review updates. We began by schools putting in statement reviews, realised very quickly that there was no way you can do a review and then literally a month or 2 months or 3 months later be converting a statement. So that's why we made that decision to take that statement conversion from schools. So if they've done a statement review and they've updated that on the TOVI profile, then we've taken that to carry out the conversion for the mandated years for this group. We still have a lot of work then next year to do the other year groups that didn't have to be done this year. There are other areas for development, as I said, that aren't on there. These were the areas for development from our self-evaluation. We know that our communication needs some work, and I think that we'll come on to that in the forward work plan. But we know that parents and carers need information. They need information about ALN that they can understand and digest, and they need somebody to come to. So we're working on that. And also just literally last week from the head teacher conference, the wellbeing conference that was held, we've collected feedback from there. So we have even more for us to work on in the future. So I think that's it there, Simon, unless there's anything you want to add on that one.
No, I don't think so. Thanks, Karen. So as a result, what we have done is put together this forward work plan. We've shared it with our inclusion board, which also has head teachers, ALNCOs, and teachers that sit on that. We've identified 8 priorities. We know that's a lot. But we think they're important. We think they're things that really need to be worked on, and they will make the most difference to families, children, and young people in Powys. So our first priority is extending satellite provision. What we mean by satellite provision, as I'm sure councillors know, is an extension of special schools. So as Karen mentioned, we've got 3 special schools, Penmaes in Brecon, Cydawen in Newtown, and Brynllaw in Newtown Kerry. We've already got an extension, a satellite of Pen Mice, and that's at Crossgate School. That's been going for just over a year now. And those children that attend that satellite are children who would attend Pen Mice, so they have those complex needs, but for whatever reason, maybe the distance is too far, maybe they're quite young, and we can't have them traveling alone in taxis, for instance. It may be the cohort of children is more appropriate within the satellite. So we have that satellite provision, and the feedback we've had from parents and from the staff who work there is very positive. And that looks at those children and young people that have those complex, severe learning difficulties. We also have a satellite of Bryn Llawach that opened at Ysgol Maes y Derwin in Ystrygynlais. Again, that will be for children who have complex behaviour, emotional and social difficulties. Again, they would be at Bryn Llawach if they were close enough to attend there. We have that behaviour satellite in Ystrygynlais because that's what the community told us they wanted. The head teachers told us that the need within Ystrygynlais was more around behaviours, emotional, social difficulties rather than those complex, severe ALN learning needs. We intend to now open a third satellite, and the plan is to open that at Ysgol Llanfyllin in the north of the county. That will be a satellite of Cadwyn, and we also hope to include Welsh-speaking provision within that satellite. Priority 2, as we've spoken, is to review and improve the provision to support learners who are neurodivergent, or ND. We know that the need for ND is increasing significantly. Year on year, the numbers who are being referred and the numbers that are being diagnosed are just staggering, really. And the numbers, as we were recently told, in June alone were around 70 diagnoses. So that's not just referrals, that's actual diagnoses. And we know that the children spend the most amount of their days within schools. So we need to ensure that the provision we're providing and the support as a local authority we're providing for schools is appropriate. We're looking at how that is across the county. That's part of our forward work plan. We're looking at how it's not just about providing one level of support. There has to be that tiered level of support throughout that young person's life. So support at home, support within the holidays, support after school, and support within the school day. So that's going to be one of our significant priorities. Karen mentioned about the transition for early years, but we are focusing on improving that monitoring, that evaluation, and that support for children with ALN birth to 5 years old. We need to keep that review under constant, provision under constant review. That's statutory as per Chapter 7 of the Code. But we need to make sure that when children are arriving in school following that preschool setting, that the schools are fully aware of what's happening, they've got the support that they need, and they've got the resources that they need to meet the needs of those children. We're looking at, as Priority 4 says, EOTAS provision. So EOTAS stands for Educated Other Than at School. It has, it's an umbrella term for a few different types of provision. One type of provision is our pupil referral service. So we have 2 pupil referral units, one in Newtown and one in Brecon. And they work with children and young people who may be disaffected from education for some reason, may have been excluded, or may be at risk of exclusion. So they work with those children either on a placement, so a 12-week placement, or if they're in year 10, year 11, maybe a full-time placement until they finish school. We've now extended that provision to include Key Stage 2. So we've had a Key Stage 2 provision in Brecon for probably just over 12 months now. From September, we'll have a Key Stage 2 provision within Newtown as well. So that's increasing that scope for EOTAS provision. One of the things we are working with our health colleagues on is those children who are deemed medically unfit to attend school. So what does that support look like? How can we support those learners who whose well-being and mental health means that they can't engage in education, but also what can our health colleagues do to try and help those children re-engage in education, whether that's through therapeutic care, counselling, anything like that. Priority 5 is about monitoring and evaluating the progress and outcome of learners who have ALN or may require additional support. Again, that's looking at those vulnerable learners. So yes, we've got a team in place, but actually is the support we're putting in place appropriate? Does it support for the outcomes of those learners? And that's really important for us because these learners, they have a difficult time, not just in education. There may be significant extenuating reasons why they need additional support. Karen mentioned it as well, improving communication and partnership working with stakeholders. That's all stakeholders. So that's parents, carers, that's our health colleagues, children's services, that's also our third sector colleagues. So improving that communication and partnership working to ensure there is true co-construction in ensuring that we're meeting the needs of children and young people across Powys. We need to ensure that there's consistency across Powys, that all schools have that inclusive vision. So going back to that fundamental change from SEN to ALN, ensuring that everybody has those expectations and those high expectations for ALN learners. And also making sure that we've got high quality universal learning provision and high quality ALP to meet statutory needs. In addition, ensuring that all learners, because we have that responsibility up to 25, have feasible future pathways that they can access learning that meets their current need, but also means they can progress further to where they want to in life. So that's our forward work plan. And I think we'll just move on now to looking at some of the things we need to do to support with difficulties that schools are having. So we mentioned quite a lot about TUVI. We mentioned that it has been made, suggested it's an example of best practice, but we need to keep that under constant review. So if schools are telling us there's a lot of bureaucracy referring into TUVI, then we need to make sure that we're changing that. We need to make sure that we're listening and ensuring that we're putting things in place that help schools rather than provide additional work. We want to make sure that the systems are embedded to support families, schools and settings in a person-centred way. So we have our single front door for all of our stakeholders. We call that the TUVI Gateway. But again, is that the most appropriate way of making sure that we're able to reach all of those different stakeholders? We have provided comprehensive training and guidance through multiple opportunities. As I said, there's training through pre-recorded sessions, drop-ins. We have linked documents, monthly bulletins, cluster working. But again, if people on the ground are saying they need something different, then we need to look at how we can provide that. The other thing we have done, which I'm not aware that it's happened anywhere else in Wales, is we're starting now a disagreement resolution panel. That disagreement resolution panel is for parents to be able to have their voices heard if they disagree with the decision that's made by one of the panels within the local authority. That panel is completely independent of anybody who will have made that decision, that panel. So the evidence is re-looked at, additional evidence is presented if there is any, and then a decision is given to parents, whether that has overturned the original decision or whether that decision has been agreed with. As I said, it's completely independent, and we also have parent representation on there. So we're trying to ensure that parent voice is heard throughout the whole process. Aaron.
Sorry, beeping in my ear, not used to Zoom. Yeah, so the documentation and the policy versus delivery. So this, you know, any feedback we get, we have a look at where we are now and where we need to go. So we have, as I said previously, streamlined all the documentation for schools to minimise that workload really for schools. So I touched on the conversions from the statements to the IDPs. and that we were completing that on behalf of all schools. Simon has talked about that single point of entry for referrals into the council, and talking to other colleagues in other local authorities, they're quite envious of that fact we do have that one point contact. So that's something that we definitely will work with to make sure that that fits in with, you know, and is supporting schools in the best way it can. And again, the ALNCO champions, I think I've touched on anyway, but we do get a lot of queries about, oh, this documentation's too much, it's, you know, it's workload, etc. We are concentrating and focus on the documentation that is statutory and if so required, you know, detailed within the ALN Act. We're not making paperwork for paperwork's sake in any shape or form, wherever we possibly can. So that's about, I think we've covered most of that, Simon. And then I think this is possibly the last one. So behaviour is an area that we get a lot of feedback for. Behaviour needs have increased, and they have increased across the board. And there is definitely a pattern of younger children requiring behaviour support. So our reception year 1, year 2 children. So we believe that's pandemic related, because it would make sense that it is. So we've reacted as quickly as we can in putting more regular support in. So our behaviour consultations that used to be termly, then they went to half termly, we now do them monthly. We don't want schools having to wait to put in a referral, then have to wait 2 weeks for that to hit our Paris inclusion panel, and then to have some support or outreach after that. So they can still refer into PIP, but we do monthly behaviour consultations, and staff who sit on that consultation panel, it's myself, it's a specialist teacher, it's the PRU executive head teacher, and it's also staff from Brentlowick Hall School. So we have that expertise there to talk through that graduated response for those children. From those there can be lots of different outcomes. It might be just supporting what strategies are being used. It could be advice around the ALN process and that LAIDP process, and sometimes it results in immediate outreach from those specialists to the schools. Again, improved EOTAS provision. We have seen the need and the requirement for Key Stage 2 is needed. And I would say right at this moment, we could even do with a foundation phase PRU setting as well. So that's something that is coming to the fore more and more. We are training to upskill schools as much as we can. We do FBA training, which is functional behaviour assessments. That's assessing training and behaviour and seeing what might be the cause of that and trying to get to the root cause of it. Relational training, which is all about those very important relationships between school staff and children, and team teach training, which is all about de-escalation for those more challenging children. We are very, very recently, Georgie has instigated a multi-agency task and finish group. This is not just around behaviour, but it's trying to make things consistent across the county. So what working parties do we need? What forums do we need? What panels do we need? How do we bring it all together? Exclusions, attendance, learner voice, vulnerable groups, and behaviour all together to make sure that we are working all together multi-agency for the needs of those children, for their best interests. We have, as an ALN department, used grant funding to fully fund trauma-informed schools training, which has had amazing feedback from staff and has made a massive difference on the ground in schools. And then following trauma-informed training, individual supervision needs to happen for practitioners as well. So that's put in place through our EP service. We do have outreach from special schools, specialist centres, and as I said, from behaviour consultations. So we do get out to schools as much as we physically can to support that challenging behaviour when it's there. The satellite provision in Estrad Lice that Simon has explained, that's open, so it opened at Easter, primarily Key Stage 2 children there at the moment, but that's not going to be just Key Stage 2, it will be whoever can fit into that cohort that's in that special school. It's called Bryn Bach, so it's Little Bryn of Brentlowick Hall. In school support and observations by central team, we do carry those out, and as I said before, we are trying to release our capacity to do that more so, because I've worked in a school that has challenging behaviour, that has specialist centres, has a nurture approach, and I know, firsthand that is very, very important. If you have a child that's very challenging, you don't want to wait for paperwork, you don't want to wait for panels. So we are aiming to get out to support and observe those children whenever we can. And just finally, the EP service deliver ELSA and MELSA actually. So the ELSA training was delivered to lots of schools, and now the MELSA, which is the emotional literacy side of supporting children in schools. So that's a full training going ahead. So we're having lots of take up for that as well. And I think that's it, Simon, from us. I think we've talked enough.
I'll stop sharing.
Thank you very much, both. Very comprehensive, very complex for us as local members. Lots of acronyms, lots of abbreviations, but well explained, and helps us identify what the massive challenge that we have as an authority to meet these needs, and the conversion over from SEN to into the new system, which I believe is supposed to be fully operational by 2024. Members, opening it up to questions now. I know a lot of you have got a lot of thoughts and questions on this. So members who would like to start off? Councillor Gareth.
Thank you, Member, and thank you to Simon and Karen for what I think is quite a sobering report. It's very worrying where we've been, and with the work that's in front of you, I think we can be really reassured that, first of all, you've identified so many of the problems that are currently within our schools. When I realised this was before us, I contacted 2 or 3 schools in our area to see where they were going, where they were feeling. As chair of governors in my own school, I know this is very high up as a concern for them in running the school. And I've got a list here that I won't, excuse me, I won't go into now thoroughly, because you have identified them in Karen's first slide. It captured a lot of the concerns and also the forward work plan. But the one thing I will say is the theme that came out from the schools is very much of them and us. And they felt isolated and struggled to be able to get the responses they needed in the right time. So this has been identified, but can I urge you, this has to happen at pace. It has to, because what I was going to conclude with is the one Elenco lead, who's only been in place for 12 months, has decided after 12 months that she can no longer stay in the role, purely because of the lack of support from county in terms of helping the children in our school who most need them. That's worrying. If we can't keep these staff there, then where are they going to come from? I could go on, but I won't, because I know there's so many other things. But one question, Chair, I'd like to ask is, you mentioned training at the end there, Karen, but what I didn't see here was about training for restraints. Because there's a number, I'll read the whole paragraph that came out to me. We have a pupil in our school who is posing serious concerns to his own safety and the safety of others. It is a matter of time before someone is seriously hurt, and powers are aware of this. And still, we've been waiting months and months and months, and no practical support to help this child. We have staff restraining the pupil daily, and yet we are still awaiting restraint training. Surely such cases should be prioritised. So is that a priority for you? Surely if it's going to take a time to roll everything out, get everything in place that you require, can I have some assurance that this will be addressed, so that the teachers who are at the coalface know and have the right training to deal with the pupils until we can get the correct IDPs in place for them? Thank you, Chair.
Anybody fancy a stab at that one?
I can, yeah, go on, Simon, after you.
No, I mean, thank you, Councillor Gareth, for those things. It is an incredibly difficult time. We know the pressure that ALNCOs are under, and we don't minimise that at all. This new system that's come in place has forced a statutory position onto them. That's not us that said that, you know, that's law. That's what the Welsh Government have said. There is no additional funding being granted for that role for schools, although we are using a lot of our grant funding to try and support ALNCOs in that. So we do hugely thank ALNCOs, and we understand the stress and the anxiety that's having on them. I would say that we do respond as quickly as possible. If that is something that again is being reiterated by schools, we certainly need to look into that. And you know, you have our assurance that you know, we will respond as quickly and as urgently as possible. In terms of restraint training, we would encourage wherever possible schools to use de-escalation techniques rather than restraint. Understand that sometimes for the safety of all of our children and staff as well, that there is no other option, but we do ask our practitioners that restraint is a last resort. As a local authority, we have provided what's called team teach training, so that's a type of restraint training. Now, I don't know particularly any other local authority that funds that training for their schools. Every other local authority that I'm aware of, and forgive me if I'm misquoting here, the schools pay for that themselves. We've invested in our executive head of the pupil referral unit in training him up so he can deliver that team teach training to schools. The issue is the team teach training is a 2-day course. It's 2 full days as well. And so finding appropriate times when schools are available to do that, and finding time as well where he can come in and do that. Now, that's not an excuse, and you know, we are doing our best to try and facilitate that, but it is something that uniquely I think we provide. There are lots of companies that do that training, so school, you know, feel that is a priority for them. They can look at that training independently. Again, that would come at a cost. So it's a difficult one. It is a difficult one. We also need to, if I can say, and this is a phrase Georgie has passed on to me, really, it's difficult if you don't know what you don't know. So lots of our schools are facing difficult challenges, and we don't at all say that, we don't minimize that at all. But what we're seeing is that maybe compared to other parts of counties, some schools aren't maybe as resilient as other schools. Some schools haven't encountered this type of need before, so it's brand new to them. So it's again making sure that we're aware, if a school is saying to us they're struggling, they've not experienced that before, that we can go in there and support them with that. Karen, I don't know whether you want to come in and say anything else about.
Well, I think Georgie's got her hand up, so she might be saying what I was going to say, which is we've had a conversation about this last week, and about the risk that having one team teach trained professional in the local authority, you know, could be going forward. So we are looking at extending that access to training. So I don't know whether you want to come in there, Georgie, because I'm sure that's what you were going to say.
It was, Giacomo, thank you, Karen, if that's okay, Chair. It was one of the elements, really. I think I'd re-emphasise the focus on de-escalation. We acknowledge that that's a need across the council, particularly, like Simon said, in schools where teachers are facing challenging behaviour they've not experienced before. So we are looking to ensure that we've got resilience within the service and more than 1 or 2 individuals to deliver that training. And again, I've been in 2 schools in the last week, and the difference in their take on how to manage ALM was really noticeable and variable. So it comes back to how do we build on the expertise we already have in our schools, because we do have some, and we do have that knowledge within there. So that again links to the Elenco Cluster Champions. So we've talked about this already, excuse me. We've provided a lot of investment into the training of the Elencos, but from what you've said there, Councillor Gareth, for that individual, it didn't do what it needed to do. So how do we capture the impact of that training now and make sure that the training moving forward is having the desired effect. And some of that is about work being more visible in schools, working alongside Elenco, supporting them in the processes, modeling those elements that we're talking about. And that is the vision for how we move forward. I think it is fair. It's a fair comment regarding Team Teach. Like Karen said, we've acknowledged it. There's a backlog. One of the challenges as well is the numbers that you can provide that training to. It's a small amount, and if we know we've got a significant amount that need it, how do we manage it? And at times we've had schools cancel, and those places then can't be quickly passed to others that need that. So it's about how we coordinate that a lot more. So I think I've covered the different elements, and if I haven't, but I just wanted to talk you through the things that we've been talking about already internally in preparation for we presented to Cabinet yesterday, and again the presentation today. We know there are elements that we do need to improve at pace, like you've said, Councillor Gareth.
Thanks, Georgie. Thanks, Gareth, for that. Do you wish to come back?
Yeah, just briefly, if I may, Chair. I know that they're all keen to work on the de-escalation training and everything, but like we're talking here about things have escalated over a period of time, and they're in a position now that they feel that the only way forward is permanent expulsion, and they don't want to go down that road. So they're doing what they can for the learner and then this happens at the end. And whereas nobody wants to restrain a learner, if that learner is in that school and possibly they shouldn't be, there's very few options left to the teachers in certain circumstances. And I hope that this is an exception. It's not completely the picture across the whole of the county, but isolated events like this do happen. And all we need to be seeing is that we are doing everything possible for our learners and also our teachers. So I'll leave it there, Chair, but thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Gareth. That clarifies that. Now, Councillor Susan, please.
Well, thank you, Chair. Simon and Karen, thank you for that presentation. My God, was that extensive with such a lot of information in there. But it's great to see how we are going forward. I'm pleased that Bryn Bach, I didn't know the name of the centre until you've just told me, Karen, but it's going to be called Bryn Bach. But it has opened, as you say. There's a lot of work gone into it, some lovely outside spaces there for the youngsters. I'm looking forward to hearing how that satellite centre is getting on. I don't know, will we have a report back to the governing body, Maestr Derwen, or will that not necessarily come back even to our governing body, because it's not really part of the school, is it? It's a satellite centre. Just a question.
Yeah, I'm sure that the governing body will have an update on the working together, because there are aspects, aren't there, of the satellite that school can hopefully utilise and vice versa. So I'm sure that will happen. But I will have a chat obviously with Mr. Randall and your head teacher. So yeah.
That's the head teacher of Bryn Llawr, is it, Gavin?
Yes.
Right?
Yes. Yeah.
Lovely. Thank you.
I'll have a chat with both of them because I do check in regularly, so I'll do that for you.
That'll be good, Karen. That'll be good, because as you said earlier on, it's something that we've needed here for different reasons for a long time. So I'm really, really pleased you've invested into that. The other question, I don't want to put Councillor Pete on the back burner here, so to speak. But it is something you said right at the beginning of this presentation. I don't know, I think it was Simon that said it, about entitlement to education up to the age of 25. I have sent a question to Councillor Pete in the last couple of weeks. He has replied to me saying that he's going to find out the answer. I don't know, Simon and Karen and Georgie, if this has landed on your desk, but it certainly went to Lynette and to John Forsey for transport. And that's regarding a young man who's leaving Maestr Derwen at the age of 18. He's a special child and he's going on to further education, but in NPT, and he hasn't got transport to go to school. So John Forsey has sent me what he thinks. The mum is not pleased or happy with the answer, so I've sent it back to Pete for him to have a look at it. I don't want to put you on the spot here, but it's about further education after the age of 18 out of county to one of our special children who can't travel on their own. I'll just leave that up with you. I'd be happy to give you some more details privately out of this meeting if you would like so. But Mum would like some replies because this young man's already attended the transition event in Neathport Albert College. Chair, I don't know if you want me to go into this further because some other members might be interested in it, or shall I do it privately?
It is interesting, Councillor Sue. I'm not sure that we should be talking about individual details in the meeting.
Well, I wouldn't give any
you could
names,
argue that Councillor Gareth has already done that. I'm in officers' hands, really, to be honest with you.
I obviously wouldn't give any information about
No,
names,
it's right.
etc.
Officers, do you want to take this further, or would you like to talk privately about it? Any response?
Grimville, to move this on, there's a discussion here probably between transport and education, because this is in a grey area between transport policy and the new requirements under the ALN Act on the 0 to 25. And I think this is the barrier I found when I was supporting Sue on this, and we haven't quite bottomed it out yet. So I'd welcome not just Sue's input, but for anyone else who's got this sort of problem. And for that matter, Councillor Gareth, the issues you raised earlier, if you can put them into an email either to myself or to Georgie, we will feed them into the review that we're undertaking at the moment to try and understand the areas of development and the grey areas between particularly ALN, transport and education, because I don't think any authority has fully worked out the full implications of the 0 to 25 entitlement yet, because it is so new.
Just to join the dots, Councillor Sue, do you feel it's an ANL problem or a school transport problem?
I think it falls between the two,
Okay.
Chair. If I could just say it as a parting shot, I'm anxious to move this on because obviously this young lad or man is going to be starting in September, so his mum needs an answer. Maybe he won't be lucky that it will be open up a discussion for people coming behind him, but mum would like, a reply to this ASAP if possible, as time is moving on and he starts in September. Thank you, Chair. Thank you for indulging me, Chair.
I guess, Councillor Sue, you'll be very interested in one of the outcomes of the motions in full council tomorrow in relation to school transport, because that might be the resolution to your problem.
I certainly will, Chair. Thank you.
Okay, Margaret, you've been waiting very patiently, and I've got Councillor Matt got a question after yourself, Margaret. So, Margaret, please speak freely. Still mic'd up at the moment, Margaret. There we go.
Oh, that's better. Yeah, sorry. Yes, thank you. I've got a few things, but first of all, can you tell me how many Elenkos we've got in county? It's only that the papers that came prior to the meeting, and as I say, I wasn't able to be there on Monday, gave some information about Elenko's questionnaire and the results of it that was done in the spring term. And I just wondered how many Elenkos we've got, because some schools share an Elenko, smaller schools, etc. Because I was trying to look at the figures from that. So just how many Elenkos have we got?
Anybody?
If I come in on this one, every school has to have an ALNCO. I'm not.
Oh, I accept that, but some are shared. The Elenko may be at more than one school. So the bodies who are Elenkos, the number of people we've got.
As far as I was aware, and I may be out of date with my information, there was only one ALNCO that was shared between two schools. My understanding was that every other school had their own ALNCO.
Right. I didn't know. I thought I wasn't too sure. So because you'd got 46 Elenkos had filled in the questionnaire, and I just wondered if you were happy with the figures that I'd seen in the documents that came prior. But when on your presentation, I think some of the areas you suggested had been highlighted were positive, and I didn't think what was in the previous in the papers before that came, I didn't think it was very positive. That was why I was asking that question. But I thought some schools, smaller schools, were having a Elenco between them, but maybe I was wrong, obviously.
It is an option that we have explored with schools previously, absolutely, and there's nothing stopping smaller schools, pooling resources to have a cluster Elenco, for instance.
I thought that was happening, and we've not had, from a scrutiny perspective, and because of COVID and all the changes, we haven't had the normal updates on ALN that we normally would have had. So I don't think that is, that's why I wasn't sure how things actually were on the ground. But talking about things on the ground, the one thing that comes up particularly, which links with something Councillor Gareth said, are immediate responses that concerns people. If you have a child coming in that you didn't know was coming, is the speed when there's something really seriously difficult and you can't cope within the normal school situation, with behavior or whatever learning needs that you can't provide for. That is very often a major concern for schools, because in smaller schools, well, in any school, it can be extremely disruptive, but in some of our very smaller schools, it can have a massive impact. And that is one thing that schools are concerned about, is how long it takes before anything, the systems work. Now, I think the Tubby system is improving things, and it's so positive, the development, that it will help. But that is a major concern, and I think still is, to all in schools on the ground. And the other particular one you've got a new person who's coming in, a health person who's going to be working within the ALN framework. But it's the lack. Schools, if you can't get a speech therapist to come and assess or to work with a child that's got a very significant issue, because we haven't got them, they're not available. As a school, you haven't got that expertise, you're reliant on other services, and that is a major, major issue for many children and many schools, but more for the children who are at the bottom of it all, who we are not supporting adequately. It's not education's fault, but that is a fact, I'm afraid. And have you got statistics on that? How many children are waiting for adequate speech and language therapy support in schools? I don't know, but that would be an area that I think needs monitoring very closely with Health Board.
Thank you. You raised some really valid points. Thank you. it's very difficult because, as you rightly said, we have no control over therapies. What we do is we work with health colleagues, we work with schools, we relay those messages, we relay the urgency of those messages. But as we know, the health board is stretched, and as a local authority, the only thing we've been able to do, and this is what we have done with speech and language in particular, we've appointed a speech and language specialist teacher, but they're not a therapist, so they can go in and they can work with schools on strategies for learning with speech and language as the focus, and that's free to service, of course, but we can't control what happens and what's provided by the health board, I'm afraid.
No, but where does that leave the children at the end of it? How are we going to overcome those issues? I mean, obviously it's not an education issue, but the new person presumably in post that we're having that is the health, I can't remember the title, but there is somebody, isn't a new person.
They are appointed, they are a health board position, so they're not a local authority position. They are employed by the health board.
Is there a person in post at the moment, or when will they be in post?
Yeah, there is a person in post, Dr. Luke Jones. Dr. Jones is DECLO for Powys, but he's also DECLO for Swansea Bay and all of our health boards as well. So he covers the 3 health boards. We meet with him very, very regularly. We do update him on all of our concerns and the school's concerns as well.
Yes, but that doesn't solve the problem, does it? So for the children who are not getting the speech therapy or whatever that they need.
No,
great. Mark, Simon, I've got Councillor Pete and Georgie coming in on this, so maybe they'll be able to help you and Margaret in their comments here. So Councillor Pete first, please.
Yeah, Margaret, thank you for this. This is what Karen was alluding to a little bit earlier in her presentation when she said I might have something to say. The DECLO is a member of the Inclusion Board, and at the last meeting we agreed that there would be a special 2-item meeting in September. The first item is to take the youth strategy forward because it wasn't quite ready for our last meeting. But the second item, at my request, he's going away and he's looking at waiting times for assessments and for support across a variety of neurodivergent, psychology, behavioural issues where the health board are involved. And we're hoping to come out of that will be, first off, it will be some certainty for the schools around how long they're having to wait for these assessments, because at the moment, a lot of the frustrations that are coming through to our service are actually expectation management on the waiting list times. But also then once we know those issues are there, we can actually start to see what we can do jointly together. So it's one of the areas where I am aware of this. ALN is actually going to be getting a fair bit more of my attention over the next 6 to 12 months. Because the transformation side is now moving into a different phase. So I should have more time. George has probably got some more specifics, so to come
coming back to you in a minute,
level.
Margaret, but Councillor Pete is right. Let's go to Georgie.
Val, thank you. Thank you, Councillor Margaret. Just to say that we had a really fruitful discussion yesterday at Cabinet as well regarding the strategic relationships with the health as well, and making sure all of these points of discussion are raised by the directors as well through their meetings, in a hope to sort of hit it at every point in the system, if you like. We've had other issues raised with us regarding medical procedures that are happening in the schools, that and whether we're our teaching assistants are the right people to be doing some of those things, and what that looks like. So Simon's in the process of having those discussions as well and gathering the information and evidence on that. So I think there's a collection of elements there. There is also, from my understanding, a significant amount of time to have an assessment window, which is where it's challenging for schools because they have to have that position to capture that evidence. But also at times the variability across the LNCOs means that the information on TUVI is not as detailed as we would need it. So I think, there's 2 points for us to be, aware of, which the guys have identified in their presentation anyway, that we need to be improving on, as well as, from conversations with our head teachers, looking at the YPIPs and the PIP panels as well, and what can be, because there is a delay, isn't there, guys, now, because of how many more people are being presented regarding the challenges that our guys are seeing. And sometimes it is about, within the schools, the teachers not having the skills to deliver it because they've never seen it before, and it is manageable. And sometimes it is about the fact that, we need to give more bespoke, tailored support around those things. So there's a collection of things there in response to your points, because we are aware of them, and we are trying to make sure that we're sort of coming in at every level in the system for the sake of the children and the voice within the system.
Thank you.
Okay, Margaret, I am coming back to you because I know you've got some more points to make. So go on, Margaret.
Not a lot now. Well, I could keep, but the other one, with special schools and the satellite that was created at Crossgates, it was unfortunate that we'd never had a progress report on the satellite because of the circumstances of the time, because that was what we would have wanted, I think, earlier. But having said that, I understand it's working well, which is good. But the expertise of our special schools must be used, but it has to be the highest quality expertise. And I therefore look at the things that relate to our special schools to ensure that they are at that level. I don't know, because we haven't had the sort of information that we would normally have had, again, because of the circumstances and the time. So I do feel that that is an issue that at some stage, not for now, but scrutiny needs to look at, so that when we are using expertise, it is of the highest quality. Fine, thank you.
Thank you, Margaret. That's a point well made. Councillor Matt, thank you for waiting so long. It's your opportunity.
That's all right. Thank you, Chair. And yeah, thank you to Karen and Simon for a really comprehensive presentation. I mean, a lot of what we covered, I just think back of my educational journey, and I wasn't actually diagnosed with my dyslexia until I was in my mid-20s, when the law firm I was working for at the time actually paid for a private assessment for me. But it's when you find out things like that, it kind of makes sense why you look back on your old school reports and, they say that you're brilliant in some subjects and in other subjects I'm not so brilliant, and that's because either I was lazy or I was being a disruptive presence in the classroom. It was never, nobody really ever put a handle on why Matt can be good at one thing, but struggle in another aspect. So I appreciate that, with a change in law as well, it's going to create a tremendous amount of work. But I'm just trying to get my head around how a lot of this works in practice. I mean, I work in higher ed, so if I get a student who comes to me and says, I got additional learning needs or whatever, I can sort of, I have to siphon them off to a different department who deals with all that in the background, does all the reports, everything comes back, and then I'm just told, what support that student has in place with their lectures, their workshops, and in terms of their assessment as well. In our schools, so if I was to go to my daughter's teacher and say, look, I think my daughter's showing traits of, some form of dyslexia or other additional learning need. How does that get taken forward? because I have had conversations about this in schools before, and the school has turned around and said, well, you need to get a private assessment. It's not something that the local authority would deal with, which is fine if you can afford to pay for a private assessment. But of course, if you can't, then that's putting that pupil at a major disadvantage. Also, the other thing that concerns me is the workloads that are going on to Elenco's. There's a tremendous amount, especially with its changes in place at the moment, which could result in a very high turnover of staff, which is not going to do anybody any good whatsoever. Least so the learners, because the learners will develop a relationship with that member of staff, and if that member of staff is changing every 12 to 18 or 24 months, then that's putting them at a major disadvantage because they're having to build this new bridge with a new member of staff all the time. So what more can we be doing to try and ensure that we provide more assistance and support to the Elencos? Are we giving them enough time in terms of their teaching load and capacity to focus on that role? Or are these Elencos having to, is it like they get 50% Elenco time and 50% teaching time for other subjects? Or is the Elenco focused specifically on Elenco? And then are we looking at providing training to other members of staff who can then support the Elenco, whose time might be then split, 50% teaching to 50% Elenco, in terms of like thinking about teaching assistants who could feed into that? And are we looking at training some of the support staff as well with things like the ELSA training, the emotional literacy support assistants? I know my wife and fellow councillor Sarah Jane, she was an ELSA for Gilwan Primary in Monmouthshire, and she told me that what she learned in that role and the positive impact it helped bring to the school with the pupils that she worked with. So are we looking at joining up other support areas such as that? So yeah, I've probably asked quite a few things there, but those are the sort of a few points. In my head, it's understanding how this all works in practice, I think, and are we given enough support? And I know it is very difficult in an academic calendar because there are not many areas of time where you do have a block of time, but how are we going about ensuring that support is in place and that time is given for staff to develop and learn, so we can try and perhaps reduce the turnover, etc.?
Okay, lots to pick up on there. Go on, Simon.
Yeah. Well, really good points. Thank you there. Thank you, Councillor Matt. I think first of all, it's a very, very common question asked about dyslexia in particular. And what we emphasise in the local authorities, the work we complete and the work we like our schools to complete, it's needs-led rather than diagnosis-led. So you don't need a diagnosis to put in the relevant support for a young person. What's good for a child with ALN is good for all children. So if you are teaching strategies for scaffolding, for writing, for numeracy, they are good for all children, and you don't need a dyslexia diagnosis to be able to do that. So that's the message we're trying to get across. Of course, we know that diagnosis does open certain avenues for children and families, but in terms of the support they get from schools, certainly it's a needs-led approach rather than a diagnosis-led approach. And dyslexia is a particularly difficult example because you can't necessarily diagnose dyslexia. You have to strike everything else off, and whatever's remaining tends to be dyslexia. So we look at it as a persistent literacy difficulty, and our EPs deliver training on that. They go into schools and deliver training on how to work with children and young people who've got persistent literacy difficulties. And we've also appointed, and she's been in post for over a year now, a specialist teacher who will go into schools and work with schools and look at how they can support children with persistent literacy difficulties. But it is, as you say, a very difficult area. In terms of training us, in terms of ALNCO, so the code states, and it's really helpful, the code is, it says that an ALNCO must have an adequate amount of time released from teaching to do their work. It doesn't say what that is. And of course, we know we've got small schools whose head teachers are also the ALNCO, are also the designated teacher for children looked after, are also the safeguarding lead. So it's really, really very difficult. We have petitioned local authority, Welsh Government, to look at the role of the ALNCO in detail, to look at the anxiety and pressure that's being put onto ALNCO. And there has been, I believe, Georgie, you may be able to tell me better, a response from the Minister that has said they will be looking at workload for the ALNCO and how that can be eased. We offer ELSA training to our LSAs as well, so our EPs provide that training to all of our LSAs who are available to do it. And as Karen mentioned earlier, they're also delivering that MELSA training, which is an additional as well. So we do have those similar training as you said that your wife had in Monmouthshire. Karen?
Yeah, the majority of staff in schools that deliver ELSA and MELSA are the teaching assistants. They're those magic people, aren't they, that we all wish we had 10 of. So yeah, because they're the ones usually carrying out the interventions. They're the ones that can, you know, grab a child from assembly or during registration to do that work with them. So the majority of ELSA and MELSA is, sometimes the ALNCOs do have that training, obviously, so that they can support those staff, because in some of our bigger schools, the ALNCO does support the teaching assistant staff workforce there, but the majority are LSA led. Definitely for teaching. The only other thing I was going to say was if and the new ALN code, if as a parent you go to school and you say, I believe my child has ALN, then school has a certain amount of time, it's in the code, so many days to respond to you to say, yes, we agree, or no, we don't, and this is why. So that's a new thing for parents, because parents have always gone into school saying, I think my child's, you know, got this and that, and there's never been a formal way that they have to respond, but they do now. So that's good. The specialist teacher for ALN, so we only have one of them, but she has gone into, and this might help Councillor Margaret's comments earlier as well, she does go into schools where there are exceptional circumstances. I know there was a school where the head teacher was the ALNCO and she was off poorly and things had to be done. So yes, they borrowed an ALNCO from another school, but in the meantime, that our specialist teacher spent a lot of time with the school staff, and then with the ALNCO that was going to cover that one school for that particular reason. So she does actually support ALNCOs that are new or that are struggling, or that in exceptional circumstances when there are issues, and she will meet regularly with that school if need be. So that's just another little bit of information.
Thank you, Karen.
Thank you, Councillor Gwynfor.
Georgie.
Diolch yn fawr, having trouble unmuting there. Just a couple of things really around that. Simon and myself have met this week regarding ALM funding and the current process we're going through regarding the funding formula. There is a national directive around the role of the ALNCO, and to a degree, for the first time, it's a little bit easier in the secondary sector because they're often in the SLT. So there's a clear expectation regarding teaching load when you're in an SLT in a larger school. So you have the economies of scale, if you like, to a degree there. I think the other thing that's coming through is around that workload can look very different from school to school, because if you're in a school that's got a significant amount of ALN learners, the paperwork for those would take considerably more time than if you've got 2 or 3 in a different school. It's still the same process, but it's you know, sort of significantly more time demanding and needs to be done. So I think we're at the point as well that as those nuances are coming through the system, there isn't potentially one size fits all. And this is where we need to be quite bespoke with that formula and what that looks like. We've got the ALNCO champions now. How do we envisage them supporting the ALNCOs? I know these guys have worked with them and they know the vision. I don't know it to the detail that these guys do. But in terms of what is the product we want of that then as well? What does that look like? And I do think we're often at that risk of, like Simon said, waiting for a diagnosis. And I had that conversation today in a school where they were saying exactly the same. There's good practice. You know exactly what you should do for learners, and you put that in place, and then anything that comes through can enable something a little bit more, you manage. So there's quite a few facets now around the different factors that can affect an elenco. Like Sam said, they're either ahead with 14 different hats on in a very small school, or there's someone that's got a significant number compared to another school. And then if you've got, and to a degree, if you've got the big number, you've got more expertise and experience because you're doing it a lot more, you know, and so that's something to consider as well as we're looking at this moving forward.
Thank you, Georgie. Councillor Matt, are you satisfied with responses? Yeah, you've got a nod of the head. Members, I'm conscious of the time, but obviously, you know, this is a massive part of our education, and we need to give it the adequate scrutiny, but it's difficult in the timescale that we're given, and we are on that timescale. If there are no other questions, I would like to make a couple of points, but if somebody else would like to make them, I'm more than happy for them to make them. But if nobody else, there's a couple of things I'd like to explore, and I'm going to give them both together. I'm going to say them as quick as I can. In the documents, there was, I think it's a figure, and I can't find it now. I think there's 46% of children who actually come forward requesting the ALN support, 46% are refused. That is fine, and if they've been through the process, that is fine. But those children have got a need of some kind, and I wonder what happens to those children now, because we're in a system now where we've got behaviour in schools isn't quite as good as it should be, because we're saying post-COVID, and this is the situation which we're getting now to schools. So are them children causing some disruption? The other thing is we've got schools with large expulsion numbers at the moment. Could this be those children? And I'm not suggesting they are, but there's 46% of children that have come forward with ALN have got a need, and are they disappearing off the structure? Do they get any support? The other thing is we've got an awful lot of children that are home educated at the moment. Is this coming from that 46%? So are we supporting those children, or are we just reliant on schools to pick up on this? That's the first point. The second point is, because I've got ALN on today's agenda, I've been contacted by various councillors, and I value their opinion because they are school governors, and they've used the words like crisis point, broken, it's not working in schools. The policy's great, but implementation and delivery isn't there. And to be fair to you all today, you've been very honest and you've recognised some of these problems, and I certainly compliment you on that. So I am going to say to Councillor Pete, and do we think we've got enough resource? Do we think we've got enough budget in this area to cope with this transformation? So those are the 2 points that I would like to make. So firstly, the 46%, or am I freezing? 46% of pupils that have stepped forward, are they getting any further support after their rejection there? Or I'm not sure rejection is the correct word, but in their need for any support. Georgie.
What I would say, Councillor Gwynfor, is that one of the things that Karen alluded to was our more multi-agency holistic team that we're bringing together in the service is around making sure those learners don't slip through the net. So we are aware of those children if regarding, like you say, the increase in exclusions. Are they an escalation, which indicates something, or are they a one-off? So we started looking at that in detail. We've recruited more EWOs as well to help with any of those elements around behaviour, attendance. Are they linked to this as well, and are they any of those learners in that percentage that you've referenced? I think the EHE one is again something that we've got that service sits within the EWO team now, talking about education welfare. So why are those learners now not in school? Are they predominantly ALN, which the general picture is they can be in other LAs, not just Powys? So why is that happening, and what are we doing about that? So what I would say is we couldn't give you the detail around each individual in that 46%, but we are certainly aware of it within the service and how we're making sure no one's slipping through the net and exploring those different opportunities. I think we've secured additional transformation funding from the transformation team to support with caseworkers and IDP conversions. I think one of my thoughts today from a visit was, how do we explore the opportunity to share better practice across our schools and potentially fund people within that system to supplement the specialist teacher work that the guys have mentioned today as well. So I think they're not, at times I'll say children do get lost in the system, but we're hoping that with all of the different elements of work that we are doing now, we're making sure that we're picking them up at that point.
Thanks, Georgie. Councillor Pete, just a question on resource and budget. It does appear that, and it's been itemised in today's reports, that there are problems, and yes, there'll always be problems, and transformation can be blamed for that. Do you think we've got enough resource, and resource comes from budgeting, really? Just a general question, and just a quick answer if you could, please, Pete.
At this stage, the genuine answer is I don't know for certain.
Okay.
And the reason I say that is because we've got the additional funding going in to support the transition. And it is a transition. So we're going through a point where there is a lot of migration into the new development plans. So that is putting an additional workload on. We've got behavioural problems coming out of the pandemic. We don't know whether they are behavioural or developmental, because we're still waiting on a lot of those on the assessments. And we've got the challenge of assessments coming back with very significant requirements for support without going into any great detail. Sometimes we are talking 5 or 6 figure sums per year to come out of the service to support one individual case. So the answer to say we'd like more money, yes, I would like to see more money going in to ALN, but I'd like to see more money going into schools maintenance. I'd like to see more money going into our schools in general. But I think what we've got to understand over the next 6 to 12 months, and this is a piece of work that I've already challenged officers on, is to get to understand how what is a good service at the centre and at the administrative level, how we can now roll that expertise that is recognised by Estin away from the centre and into the schools, so that the schools gain the benefits of the building blocks that have been put in place over the last 3 years. And until we've done that, I don't know whether the quantum of money going in for ALN is right, but it is something I'm asking officers to keep a regular eye on so that they can tell me, so that when we look at integrated business plans in September and in the following September, if there's more resources needing to be going in, we can put the bid in at the appropriate time.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Pete. I was expecting you to say yes, so thanks for that honesty. Members, any other questions you wish or comments you wish to make on ALN? Nope. Okay, that's great. Listen, Karen, Simon, we've given you a bit of a grilling. We fully recognise your efforts. Your knowledge was exceptional in your report. Really great, brought a greater understanding. I can only speak on myself, but greater understanding and the challenges ahead. You were very honest in your reports, and we thank you for that. So thank you, and Councillor Pete and Georgie, thank you for helping with the debate as well. Members, we move on. Time is ahead of us. We move on to item 7 on your agenda, school visits. There's been a suggestion as regards the usefulness of scrutiny, that, and the previous item has been a perfect example of this. There's a suggestion that maybe school visits, or to visit the coalface to have a better understanding of items which are scrutinising. The previous item now, we could have spoke to Elenco's. It certainly would have given us a flavour of what is happening. So that's something which I agreed to bring to our scrutiny committee, that if there was something that we wanted to target in the future, there's an opportunity either as individuals or as a group, well, not so much as an individuals, but maybe a working group or even the full scrutiny committee, that we could actually bring in people off the coalface into our meetings. I'm just asking after suggestions, or do you think this is a great idea, or something that we don't need to do? Georgie.
Chair. I think there's merit in people visiting schools and talking to people at the coalface. I'm just conscious at the moment with the lot of work we've done with head teachers in Powys recently around their well-being, the workload they're balancing, and any sort of additional pressures. You'll know nationally that we've got action short of strike happening in schools, so we are managing that and trying to ensure those visits that we provide, particularly around that area of work, is in a supportive capacity. So if Scrutiny feel it would enable yourselves to see elements of the work that happens on the coalface and the discussions we're having here, it's certainly a manageable option. It's just, ensure that we're clear around the purpose of the visit for the head teacher in the school and how we manage that, because
yeah, and I fully agree, it has to be well managed and well planned. Just as an example, I understand that there was I don't know what it was terminology was, there was a head teacher's right across the board. A scrutiny member could have sat in that and been an observer. There would be something which couldn't, wouldn't have implemented on the school service at all. Councillor Glynn, followed by Margaret, please.
Well, I suppose just to say that I know that the Health and Social Care Scrutiny Committee have taken a kind of similar approach. And unfortunately, obviously, I came off that committee and wasn't able to fully take part in that. But I know, speaking to members of that committee, that that's something that they found really helpful. And I suppose, it's more about it's more about membership development, isn't it, for us as scrutiny members than anything else. It's not about us scrutinising any particular school or any work going on in individual schools, but just so we're better informed when we're coming into these scrutiny sessions, isn't it? So yeah, it's something I'd fully endorse, and really grateful that it's something that's been put on the agenda. Thanks very much, Chair.
Yeah, thank you, Glenn. Margaret, you've got a comment.
It links.
Go on, you've got it then. No.
Again, it links with training that we had a few years ago, scrutiny training. Councillor Peake will probably remember, because we were encouraged as part of training, not as training, but from the training, to actually look at areas that the committee are responsible, are working with, the areas that they feel they need more information, and to do the sort of thing, either having people to come to us to speak or going out to. So I think it's exactly what the training said. And we did begin to look at that more in the past, but then of course COVID and everything else has come, and it hasn't actually, it hasn't been developed as far as it would have been, I think, had COVID not arrived. But so I think it goes exactly with that. And I think it's a very good idea to consider for the future.
Good. I think there's a general acceptance of that. So in view of the timescales we're under today, maybe I'll do a bit of work in our forward work program and identify something and perhaps share it by email, perhaps suggestions, and work with the school service to see if we could start on this and see where we go. I don't think we can add to it in today's debate, really. So if you're happy with that progression. Also, item 6 and item 7, we made a lot of comment. If you're happy, I'll work with Kath to bring some recommendations or some comments from the committee, really, rather than to have some conclusions done today. Item 8 on the agenda is our final item, a forward work program. It looks quite a busy program now, and I'm open to comment on it, and we need to return to some items during the year, and we've got school transformation to deal with as well. One other item which we need to deal with, whoever was in the pre-meet on Monday, I explained about the home to school transport was going to the Economy and Residence Committee. The Economy and Residence Committee also suggested that we have a look at this as well. So I'm fully supportive of that, because I think it has a certain relevance to us in this committee. So we have to squeeze that into our programme as well. I think we're thinking of that in September, but I'm open to suggestions or items which you wish to scrutinise or or even take out of our program. But obviously there are certain things which we need to scrutinise. But are you happy with the work program? Anything you want to add to it? Good. That completes our meeting for today. As usual, we're encouraged to have a period of reflection after our meeting. I sadly cannot stay with you because I've got another appointment, but please, with Gareth's agreement, if you want to have a few comments after the meeting, more than happy for you to do that, and Gareth can feed back as per last time, really. But I do have frozen. It's good to freeze at the end. Have I just frozen, have I? Yeah, okay. Anyway, I was just thanking everybody for their attendance today. And as I said, I think it's been more than a useful committee meeting. And I thank everybody for their contribution. So thanks very much, everybody. Bye.